That's the sound of the fun police. There's been a lot of conversation as to what the best Spider-Man Brand New Day deck is, what the best Batroc deck is, what the best move deck is. I kind of think the answer to all of those questions is the same, and it relies on a fundamental understanding of what is good about the move package and what is not so good about the move package. This deck is a deck that has a certain amount of cards that are engine and a certain amount of cards that are reactive or proactive answers to other decks. This is a fairly common piece of deck construction in Marvel Snap because not every deck has enough engine cards to fill out their deck. And alternately, because sometimes certain engines just simply don't get tall enough. When you are an engine that has certain advantages and disadvantages, you need to build the rest of your deck around accommodating those advantages and disadvantages. The biggest advantage that the Move, Batroc, Craven, Sam Wilson, Hydra Stomper package has is that it has some of the best cheap scalers in the game. And cheap scalers are amazing. Games where you play Sam Wilson, Batroc, and Craven mean you're going to have things that are like a 112, a 214, a Sam Wilson that is enabling all of these things, but I guess technically he's only still a 2-7. That kind of power is unmatched in basically any other shell. And it's the kind of shell that allows you to customize around it. But the downside inherent in this is you just simply don't have any other cards that measure up. The package of the Batroc move deck is actually fairly compact. There really aren't any good replacements for when you don't draw Sam Wilson, or when you don't draw Craven, or when you don't draw Batroc. Those are the only cards that actually do it. So I think a lot of people look at a deck like this and they're like, how do I expand the core package? But the honest answer is you really very much can't expand the core package. There aren't things that are equally as good to these cards that we just happen to not be running. And because you can't meaningfully expand the core package, it means that this deck has two paths in front of it. One is to play at a sort of marginally lowering rate additional cards that can help this deck do more points, things like Mary Jane, for example. But the other is to say those cards aren't worth it. I would rather stop my opponent from going over the top of me and then play this deck like I am front running. Like I am going to start from being ahead because I have the best 2-drops and 1-drops in the entire game. And then all my more expensive cards are just built around leveraging that energy efficiency by playing cards that are not energy efficient, but instantly win matchups against decks that would go over the top of my scalers. And that's how you get to a deck that is built like this one. The main thing I want to get across here is the concept of diminishing returns on investment. There are a couple of really high-level outliers in this Batroc move package, and our goal is to play as many of those as we possibly can, rather than going into other, more normal, more reasonable things that can help support these cards maybe, but are not fundamental to their functioning or fundamental to their being outliers. I think a great example of this is Silk, who we are playing as a let's make this package function card, but if we could play a second Sam Wilson, we just would. And that is a card that we just sort of fundamentally have to accept. This is a card that will have some amount of diminishing returns on it because it is the second copy of an effect. We aren't always going to play it when we have the better version. But I do think that Silk is another example compared to something like Mary Jane of being the second copy of an effect that is quite good. And I think the difference to me between Silk and Mary Jane is Silk is doing other stuff. Silk is getting multiple procs per turn, for example, and on top of that is also a big card that helps us trigger our Wilson Fisk. There's stuff that Silk is doing that other cards in this package are not. And I think the further outside these core move cards you go, the more you're getting diminishing returns on investment compared to just playing a relevant tech card. Batroc is one of the cards that makes this shell what it is. This is a shell that is unbelievably powerful, but unbelievably dependent on having some specific cards. Now, Batroc is an excellent card who is incredibly dependent on Silk and Sam Wilson, and now Spider-Man Brand New Day to a smaller extent, to be a functional, viable part of this package. It is an incredibly cheap card that does everything this deck wants. When you have Sam Wilson Batroc, you are getting additional 2 power on Batroc for every time you move your Sam Wilson. When you have Sam Wilson, Batroc, and Kraven, you are getting additional power onto Kraven every time you do that as well. And of course, Hydra Stomper, counting the total number of moves. This is the fundamental interaction that makes this deck so powerful. You take Sam Wilson, already a strong card. You add Kraven, already a strong card in the context of Sam Wilson. You add Batroc, and suddenly you're getting way too many bonuses from cards that are way too cheap. Spider-Man Brand New Day has been a phenomenal addition to this list, largely because it can just move 2 times. When you don't have Sam Wilson, having a card like Spider-Man Brand New Day to pair with your Silk to make sure that when you need a card to be in a certain place, you can make that happen. To use this as a card to prevent Silk from screwing you over, he can make that happen. To add additional power to cards, he can make that happen. This is an absolute all-star slam dunk here, although he is in a relatively more supportive role. Maybe it'd be easier to call him a Gold Glover. Kraven is the most sort of attached to the core card here, which is to say Sam Wilson Batroc is what this deck works based around, but when you have Sam Wilson, Batroc, and Kraven, Kraven is the one who'll see the major benefits of that. Kraven is a card that is phenomenally powerful with Sam Wilson. Of course, with Sam Wilson and Batroc, he is significantly stronger than Sam Wilson on a sort of game-to-game basis. This is going to be your scaler that gets up to 13 power or 15 power or 17 power. Kraven is the big guy in a lane because Batroc and Sam's shield move to him and then move away. Spider-Man Brand New Day moves to him and then moves away. And that fundamental repetition of his trigger is what the deck works based around. Sam Wilson is probably the single most underrated card in Marvel Snap. He was released incredibly strong. He's been nerfed 3 times, and he is still incredibly strong. This is the card that allows this deck to exist. If Sam Wilson did not exist in his current form, we would not be playing any of this stuff. He is the glue of this deck. He is the focal point of this deck. This deck rotates around Sam Wilson. When you have a choice of cards to play on turn 2, it is always Sam Wilson. He is the guy. A move every turn for your Hydra Stomper, a move every turn for your Kraven, a move every turn for your Batroc. That is what he does. Silk is bad Sam Wilson. It's honestly pretty simple. This is a card that is not good at doing what it does the way Sam Wilson is, because her results are unpredictable and because you are not necessarily guaranteed to get her in a space where you are comfortable moving her the next turn if all you want is to make sure that you get your procs and you get your Batrocs. You have much less control over her than you do over Sam Wilson's shield, and that is fundamentally the biggest thing that makes her bad. But this deck needs moves. It needs a volume of moves, and it needs them cheaply. And so we are playing the cheapest, highest volume move enabler that we can. Yes, Sam Wilson is significantly better, and yes, Silk is still a card we have to play. The first of our tech cards is Cosmo. Now, I do think that this one is the one that's the most up in the air here. Maybe Stardust, maybe CGR, but my instinct is that it's Cosmo. The thing Cosmo is trying to do here is primarily prevent against the outpouring of Shadow Kings that can make your oh-so-hard-earned scalers feel incredibly bad. This is a powerful card at doing that, but this is not necessarily a deck that always needs to be able to do that, because you are able to play through Shadow King fairly competently thanks to Wilson, Fisk, and Hydra Stomper. I have thought about replacing this with Mercury, so you have a matchup that's good into the other decks that are moving cards. I think it is a very valid thing to do, but Cosmo himself is just such a powerful stopper of random deck that's going over the top of me that I do think there's a lot to be said for including him. This deck is excellent at getting cards that are like 7 to 10 power in locations, but that does mean that sometimes it can be capped on output, because sometimes your gate is not energy expenditure, but your gate is actually how many spaces you have at a location. Hydra Stomper is your most efficient power per space card in this deck if your deck is functioning. Sometimes when your deck isn't functioning, it'll be a 3/5. But when your deck is functioning, this guy is 13, 14, 15, very reasonably large, and a very powerful card in that right, because you just simply don't have another card that is very often going to get to that level. The only other card that can get to that level is Craven, and Craven has to be on the board so they know he's there. The major upside of Hydra Stomper is you can play him on the final turn of the game as a really big guy to deploy to where you need it. A card like Craven is often a signal to either avoid the lane or invest their strongest stuff in the lane or Shadow King the lane. Hydra Stomper is one of those that's Craven sized, but you can play him on the final turn, and that is incredibly meaningful to how this deck plays out. The thing you are the most scared of, more than Shadow King, more than really anything, is someone copying Gambit Horseman of Death. And I think there are a lot of ways to try to approach that matchup, and it's definitely the kind of thing where if they're doing it, you just have to respect it, and you cannot stay in those games, because one of the big things that scalers are very, very bad against is something that removes them and they can't do anything about it. Now, we could talk about things like playing armor in a deck like this. It's a conversation you can have. My instinct is that it is far more important to just prevent them from being able to easily access their output. I don't want them to be able to play things like Bastion and get those discounts going. I don't want their Quinjets working. I don't want their Valentina working. I don't want their Iron Patriot working. I want them to have to get Gambit active the old-fashioned way, and that is what Mobius is doing. This is purely a nod to that list. We are not a good deck into Gambit stuff, and we need them to not be able to combo off on us, because it is impossible for us to win if they get enough Gambits down. You know, I say impossible, but one of the things I do like about this list is that between Miles and Wilson Fisk, there are actually some quote-unquote cheap cards that are ungambitable, and that does actually factor into how that matchup plays. Miles here is an excellent card who does amazing stuff in a deck like this just by being a 1/6 that cannot get blown up by Gambit. That is a shockingly relevant thing in the matchup. Stardust is a pure tech card that is aimed at a variety of decks that do things that go over the top of you. Now, I do think that some of those decks do get hit by things like Cosmo, and Stardust is a relatively low output card. At 4/6, he's just... They just aren't really doing a lot for what your deck is trying to do. This is not a card that is going to win you a ton of games in the sense that you want it to. This is a card that is going to make your opponent retreat a lot, because when Stardust does show up, they are an incredibly dominant presence, but that's not really a guaranteed thing. I've loved Cosmic Ghost Rider in this deck, but I love Cosmic Ghost Rider in most decks that can afford him. This is just a great card at covering your bases. One of the big things with a deck like this is just not getting overrun, and many of the things that overrun you are related to Cosmic Ghost Rider. This is a card that turns off Captain Carter's. It's phenomenally good at doing that. You are much happier, at least I am, playing Cosmic Ghost Rider in the matchup against the Carter Brood deck than you are playing the Stardust, which turns off the Broods. Not that they aren't both helpful, but the CGR feels a lot more game-winning to me unless my opponent is investing in, like, specifically Brood and Grandmaster in order to beat me on the final turn of the game, because a lot of the time, if you don't turn off their Captain Carter combo lane, they're just going to have a big enough guy to beat you in that lane, whether or not it gets multiplied by 3. And so CGR is excellent at just making games fairer. Wilson Fisk may look like a bit of a weird one here, but like I said, I enjoy just having a big, expensive guy that does not immediately eat it to Gambit, and I think between him and Miles, we have a lot more ability to play through, like, a smaller amount of Gambits. The premise of the Mobius in our deck is that in that matchup, if we stop them from comboing, they still might be able to get 1 or 2, but if we have enough guys that we're actually confident in, we should be good. And that is what Wilson Fisk and Miles are doing. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for watching. As always, I've been KMBest. You've been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one. But before you go, I would like to remind you that I am hosting a tournament on the 11th. Tournament signups are still ongoing, and you can find the link in the description. Thank you so much. World's first Sam Wilson on 2. Holy shit. I also find move decks require too much mental work. Fuck. They're like me, but better. Because they drew a 1-drop. Okay, hold on. I'm a snap. I feel like holding this 1-drop is vaguely important, and I can't exactly figure out why, but I think it just is. I think it's like that.
Hi, I'm Spider-Man.
Something like this. A lot of cards. Jeez. Well, I don't even have any cards in hand, so they're definitely winning this. I don't know what that last card could possibly be. But they moved a lot of fucking cards to there. Hydra Stomper. Okay. I guess we're fine. Seems good. I skipped the season pass since it's moved. Thanos. Okay, so we have a hand that is non-functional again. I don't know if this is a mistake or not. So that probably isn't good. The Shang-Chi is interesting. The Angel's interesting. Because what the Angel means is they're going to blow up that Batroc. That's what the Angel means here.
Hi, I'm Spider-Man.
Venom Dormammu. Okay. We do have a Stardust. That's quite good. I'm gonna snap. I assume this actually bricks the Dormammu. Now that you mention it, I can't say I know for sure. But they're not getting to death, at least. Oh, fuck. My CGR. Unpleasant. Wait, they have... Oh, I'm stupid! I didn't have priority. I'm dumb. I'm smart. I'm smart! Fucking... I'm stupid! Dude, that's the best card in my deck! Oh, jeez. Just playing real Marvel Snap today. Good God. No Sam. Nothing.
Opponent snapped.
What would they do here? So this adds 5. $14. God damn, that was close. I was thinking it was like some juggernaut shit on the right.
Victory.
Gone to fondue. Hell yeah. PBR, eh? All right. Okay, well, that's useless. No blink for you? Oh, yeah. Love to see it. All right. So that probably wins us the game, correct? Do we think that wins us the game? Surely they don't play Dragon Lord in the Galactus deck, right?
Oh, snap.
They play one card a turn. We can't get Galactus. Correct. Also, another one